The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy that you're here, and we're going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to allow an extra minute or two for a few additional attendees to show up. So stay tuned. All right, well, it's a couple minutes past the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming today to our webinar on information sharing. We're glad you could join us, and I'd like to make a brief introduction. So our speaker today is Pete Odell. Pete is a co-founder of Swan Island Networks, and he has been the CEO of the company since 2015. Pete has worked in the technology, security, and software space throughout his career. Before joining Swan Island, Pete served as the chief operating officer for a number of high-growth startups and was president of Autodesk Retail Products. He's also the author of several books, including Silver Bullets, which is a book on interoperable data, and Cyber 24/7, Risks Leadership Sharing. Exciting news, his new book, Global Shared Resilience, is slated for publication in Q4 of this year, 2020. So with that, thank you all for joining. There will be a Q&A time at the end. Please feel free to enter questions in the chat window that's on the right panel of your screen, and we'll do our best to address those at the end of the call. In addition, we'd love to hear from anyone after the call with questions, ideas, or for further discussion. So with that, I'll hand it over to Pete Odell.
Great, thanks, Julie. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment and put out some kudos for all the essential personnel out there. Certainly, the healthcare workers are front and center in everybody's minds, but we also work with some of the large security companies, and all their personnel are essential and out there on the front lines while I'm safely giving this webinar from the comfort of my house. So this webinar is going to be about 35 minutes, 40 minutes. We have a couple others that are also on our YouTube channel, one about ramping the recovery and another one about natural disasters in this period of the COVID epidemic and pandemic. So if you want to look at those are available. This one will be recorded. If you want to point someone else who couldn't make it to this, it'll be on our YouTube channel over the next several days. So with that, let's get started and talk about a specific aspect of the recovery in a way where you may be able to save yourself some time and accelerate your organization's reentry back into the global economy. So from an agenda standpoint, I'll give you a very brief introduction of Swan Island Networks, and then we'll talk about, both the recovery, information sharing, actions you can take inside of this information sharing discussion that we're going to have, and I'll give you a brief overview to one of our tools that could assist you, although by no means is it the only tool out there. There's plenty of tools out there and plenty of ways you can use information sharing, and that's mostly what we're going to focus on today. And then, as Julie mentioned, we'll have a Q&A period as well. So we are a Portland, Oregon-based company. Our office is down in South Portland by the river, although everybody's working at home safely right now until it's time to maybe go back to work, although a lot of people have liked the idea of actually working from home. We've been around for 15 plus years doing innovative software solutions in the security space, working with both corporations, government, and a number of other public-private partnerships. We have a very large resilience network in New York City through the NYU Intercept Group, and we're an Allied Universal technology partner. Allied Universal is a $7 billion plus security firm that's providing a large number of people to the hospitals and other critical service providers right now during the lockup time in the pandemic. And from a technology standpoint, we are a Microsoft Azure cloud technology and built on the Microsoft technology stack. So very, very strong software capabilities, all developed in the USA. On the right-hand side, you'll see some dashboards that'll give you an indication of some of the work we do. These are all COVID-19 tracking dashboards that you can see. You're welcome to share these links with anybody that you want, and we'd be happy to take feedback on those as well. So I wanted to put the recovery into a global context, and starting at the highest level. We've never stopped the planet before for all the discretionary things. I mean, fortunately, this pandemic was not accompanied by a huge power outage. It wasn't, we have not had major natural disasters happening at the same time. Although there are certainly some tornadoes, and there's some forecasts for bad weather across the United States over the next several months. But we've never shut the planet off in terms of restaurants and recreation and cruises and sporting events and all the other things that happen on a day in and day out basis. And restarting, it's going to be challenging. It's likely to be very difficult, even at the best of times, and it's going to get worse for everybody if planning isn't done, as far in advance as possible, and replanning done, which is a major portion of this the webinar that we're going to talk about today, is the using information sharing to help stay ahead of changes. I think you're going to see many overlapping issues, priorities, jurisdictional shifts and changes, and a lot of things across company silos and organizational silos that were always taken for granted before. Things worked a certain way. This is how we got from A to B. We didn't really need to talk to people across the hall. And I think a lot of that's going to change, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. And I also wanted to underscore from an economic standpoint the urgency of driving, the economy back to whatever the new normal is going to emerge as. And this is a unscientific analysis, just basically saying if 30% of the economy is shut off right now, that equates to about $75 billion a day worldwide. So a significant amount of dollars. And then these are some of the potential areas that I think you're going to see, work testing, liability, overlapping guidance, regulations, and best practices, supply chains, virus recurrence potentially right in the middle of reopening. And then I've been doing a series of brainstorming meetings with different corporations every Friday for the last several weeks, and several small things emerged. Public transportation and even elevators in multi-story buildings. 110-story buildings. Suddenly, the fact you can only put 4 people in an elevator safely with enough social distancing makes that an incredible choke point for getting back to normal. So that's a little bit of global context, and then. And then the recovery big issues are, when do we start? How long is this going to take? There are many things out there. Some things are already starting. You're seeing a tremendous number of reopenings, beginnings, this phase 1 reopening in the United States that are starting up right now. And I think you're going to see all these external forces of, the change driving us to this new normal. What is that going to mean? Are we going to have, every vacant seat in the middle on a plane? Are we going to have sporting events that are only 25% at capacity? When does that change? When does that become the way it used to be, or does it ever go back to the way it used to be? And there are a series of economic models out there about the recoveries, with the W representing a fall off, a resurgence, but then another recurrence of the virus, which causes things to go back almost as low as they are today, and then hopefully back up. So very complicated from the standpoint of a W type of model. The V is just a straight, everything's going to get better soon, just no worries. A U is it's going to get better, but it's going to be an elongated recovery. And the L, unfortunately, is one where things have gone down and they've flatlined. So if you look at certain industries, the cruise industry is being deemed as a really tough industry that may have a very hard time getting back to any kind of new normal. And then those same external forces can cause major changes in the way we work. So, for example, what happens if 40% of the people that are working from home don't go back to the office? That they've decided, wow, I can do this from home. It's much safer. I've got more work-life balance. I never like to commute anyway, and now my company knows I can do my job from home. And so, the shift of what that can do in terms of changing the workforce, in changing the real estate market, all those types of things are going to have a major impact on how this recovery comes back. And similarly with unemployment, you've seen in the United States, we're at 29 or 30 million people unemployed. How much of that comes back? How fast? And what happens if, in fact, that rate stays persistently high? Does that cause another economic set of problems? And then while we're happily battling the pandemic, there are other concurrent threats out there that can turn around and impact our lives, right? I listed some natural ones, hurricanes, fires, flooding, but we've also got the possibility of conflict, famine in countries where the virus is causing major problems to the food supply, those kinds of things. And you still have the ever-present cyber attack capability, where people can come in and steal information. In fact, there's been a significant upshift in cyber attacks during the pandemic. And then there's public perception. So when's it safe to go back to church? When's it safe to go to an NFL game? Is it ever going to be safe to get on a cruise ship again? What's the public perception in terms of driving the economy? And then who's going to emerge stronger? So you've seen several companies like Zoom has come back and had a huge influx of business. LogMeIn, which makes GoToWebinar, which we're using right now, I think the same way. Netflix, other organizations that are digitally based are actually doing really well. And Microsoft and Apple have continued to hold their stock market value because of the capabilities they bring to the table from a virtual standpoint. And then you have to assess from your organization, what are the most important variables for driving back to the recovery? And these are some of the organizational parameters we look at as we work with different customers that changes that particular set of priorities quite significantly. A small town restaurant that has a single location in the middle of a state that has a very few cases, like Wyoming or Montana, is going to be very different than a multi-tenant high-rise where a company that has 5,000 employees on the 45th through the 52nd floor are working, right? Similarly, a company that's deploying people out, say an air conditioning or HVAC company that's going to visit customers on a day in and day out basis, is going to be very different from a company that can provide services from their office over the internet. And then you've got ones where the customers are essential to the business, like Disneyland and Disney World. So you've got huge things there where the parameters for what's happening inside your organization are key to how you're going to approach the recovery. These are some of the mitigation strategies. Information sharing is number 3, and we're going to spend the rest of the webinar mostly talking about that one. Organizing your organization around the idea of a corporate nerve center. There's a great McKinsey article, and the link is actually presented later in the PowerPoint, so you can look it up if you like. It talks a lot about how do you drive the organization to pay attention to all the things that are going to change and understand the fact that the new normal is not going to be like the old way of doing things, and that everybody's going to have to communicate at a much higher level, right? And that happens both internally in terms of information sharing inside the corporation, but also intelligence and situational awareness from the outside. with the rate of change that I think you're going to see during the organization, you may need to monitor hundreds of different sources of information in order to stay current with what's important for your critical path to move back open. And we'll talk a lot about information sharing. That information sharing is both intra-company, inside your industry. So if you're a manufacturer, you may want to know what all the other manufacturers are doing and share information on particular issues. Regionally, in the sense of if you're in a big city, what are the other 50 companies that are within 25 blocks of you? What are they doing to get back open? What are they having common problems? Are there things you can get together on and share resources, share information, share knowledge? And similarly with your customers and suppliers, how do you help drive information so that everybody gets back to the new normal faster? And that means everybody keeping watch and having a fast feedback cycle around that capability. So I did want to expand a little bit on the organizational nerve center concept, and that is approaching the recovery as a crisis. Right? If the fact is there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of impacts, and if you do the recovery badly, it may jeopardize your company's existence or your organization's existence as an entity. Right? It's like, oh, we did the wrong things, and now we're suddenly out of cash, we're out of customers, we've been preempted because people don't want to do it the way we used to do it. So it's a very important thing to approach at a very serious nature. And many companies are considering the idea of a chief recovery officer, where someone who's in charge of all the other resources inside the nerve center reports to the C-suite, reports to the board, and is singularly responsible throughout the recovery for making the kind of cross-organizational decisions that have to be made to get back into the economic gain. And that same with that cross-functional team working for that individual, being able to span all the different parts of the company and being able to monitor the information needed on a 24/7 basis. So lots of things there from the from the corporate nerve center, using that as a way to reach out both inside the organization, and then as we talk more about external sharing, the ability to reach outside the organization. So let's dive into information sharing. And with the idea or the definition that we'll use as the exchange of information within a defined group for mutual benefit, right? This is not reading a website, right? It's sharing information with people that people that you can actually have a long-term trust relationship with, and be able to move to a greater set of knowledge as the sum of all parts, as opposed to each person doing it themselves. We learned those lessons on 9/11. Our intelligence community had been fairly fragmented for many years, and we found out by not being able to connect the dots between those various groups that was traumatic and allowed terrorists to take advantage of the United States on 9/11. One of the mottos that came out of the 9/11 lessons was dare to share, right? We're taking a big risk by going out and sharing and trying to give the enhanced visibility of all that information to everybody. So, and as we talk about information sharing, I want you to consider the idea of a vetted community, people that you can trust, people where you can say things and they're not attributed, also known as the Chatham House rule, where a group of people can share information, but it's not suddenly attributed to them, where suddenly it fires back on their stock market value, or they're taken out of context. That you can trust the information. Although, again, I would say in most cases for the recovery, you don't have to share proprietary information. You're sharing, best practices, news, all kinds of things that are actually relevant to the recovery, but are not necessarily proprietary to your industry. And the information sharing is going to be across a number of segments. So you have general information sharing, where the virus recurrence is happening, what states are up, what states are down, but there's also going to be sectors, industry sectors, what do manufacturing companies do for health screening as their employees show up for work? What are high-rise buildings doing to queue people up for elevators up and down the building? Is there work shifting? And then regional sharing. What are people doing in a specific region that may be all inside of one particular county or one metropolitan region where the rules there are different than the facilities that they have in another state or another country, and being able to vet those from a localized standpoint. And so these are some examples of some information sharing organizations that are out there. The New York Metropolitan Resilience Network, run out of New York University, was set up after Superstorm Sandy as a way to share regional situational awareness across a wide number of organizations. There's about 400 people credentialed to use that. InfraGard is a fantastic public-private partnership sponsored by the FBI. 70,000 highly vetted members across the United States. And if you're not part of InfraGard, I'd certainly recommend that as a way from a security standpoint of sharing information on different threats. And then also on the threat side are the ISACs, the Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, which are typically focused on an individual segment. So for example, the financial services ISAC, all the members of that particular ISAC are financial services people, and they work together on some common financial cybersecurity problems and other things, but can certainly interlock with other sharing organizations. So I wanted to touch on, why is this critical? Maybe you didn't do a lot of information sharing previously, under the recovery. Why is it important to pay attention to this now? And one of the reasons is this is going to be very complex, both at a local level, at a global level. Lots of things are going to be changing continuously. So for your organization, having a better response time to those changes and getting more awareness means, more dollars to your company in terms of recovery, driving your sales back to where they were, making your employees safer, all those different things. And if the recession that's projected as emerging over the next 12 to 18 months, is as deep as some people think it's going to be, it's likely your budgets are going to be cut, which means you've got to be thinking about how do I get more productive with the same or less, resources that I have right now. And you may have to completely revamp the way you do certain things. So having having flex time may not have worked before, but now you have to do it in order to stagger people into the into your different facilities and be able to do health screening and making sure you're maintaining social distances. And the other key thing to track, and the information sharing can be a very good thing on this, is innovation. So, in innovation may be a strange thing to talk about in the middle of the pandemic, but tough times really tend to drive, amazing thinking on people's parts, and ways of things that have never been done before are now being thought of. Somebody's coming up with a new innovation. I mean, we've had ventilator innovations where suddenly we have low cost, high capability ventilators, whereas it used to be very expensive and very slow to build. So staying abreast of innovation may help you drive your organization's capabilities by picking up, new technologies, new things that people have discovered. And then another key, kind of the opposite of innovation, is misinformation, right? There's a lot of bad information being shared out there. One questionable piece of information that came out this morning was a report that says the virus is getting more contagious. There's, a singular report that came out. I don't know whether it's true or false, but it's one that, if suddenly somebody grabbed that and started, running with it, that may actually cause a lot of implications on what they do from a recovery standpoint. So important to make sure that you're sharing information on what is both really good and what is potentially really bad for your organization. And I wanted to touch on just the idea of savings through sharing. We touched on budgets and resources in the previous slide, but I just wanted to underscore that there's a big hidden cost in organizations of using time that the organization is paying for and could be dedicated to other things. If you can save that time, it can really add up to a substantial amount of money, and most of it's mostly hidden all the time, right? So it's like, oh, I showed up, I went to work, I had to do a certain amount of effort, and I went home. Well, part of that effort may have been an hour here, an hour there that you could have used to do other things and save through the idea of information sharing. So, And then in the spirit of information sharing, I wanted to point out, three different links that you can use. One's a very good article by Continuity Insights. One is an article I mentioned earlier about business decision in uncertain times by McKinsey, and the other one is a USGS display of a whole set of resources. And so what'll be interesting is if you haven't heard of all three of these, you're already benefiting from information sharing. And I just want to underscore, that's the important thing, is more eyes on this amazing amount of information that we have out there on the internet today, and also within the boundaries of our organizations. The more eyes that are processing through and recommending and helping things be noticed can really be useful in this kind of high-speed environment that we're in. And I wanted to touch on some of those key information sources, and have you think about those from the standpoint of both assimilating information but also sharing. So, there's thousands of news outlets, and if you're a multinational corporation operating in 50 or 100 countries, you realize how big the world is and how many different things you have to pay attention to on a day in and day out basis, especially today with the entire world, moving at different speeds and different recovery roads. Raw social media, things that haven't been confirmed, can provide a very fast set of inputs and feedback into what you're looking for and what you're monitoring from a priority standpoint, but you can balance that with trusted Twitter and RSS feeds from known sources like NYPD or CDC, those types of things. Obviously, you're tuned into webinars. You're looking at those today with us. And I also would encourage you that on YouTube, there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that shares on YouTube on a day in and day out basis. And sharing those links with other people that have the same issues of you when you find something really good really helps drive the best information to the top of the pyramid. Similarly, with the other things I've listed, all those are other sources that can actually be valuable to you as you go out and look at what kind of information do we have to share. So that's a very quick overview to information sharing, why it's important and why I think you should consider it as one of your key strategies during this recovery. And I'd encourage you to start the recovery planning, right now, if you haven't already been doing it. Think about how much information sharing could save you, from a hard saving standpoint, but also from a how do I get back faster? What's a into the game as we start things back up. And think about, both from a strategic standpoint, regional, from an industry model, all the different areas that you might be able to apply information sharing to drive information. So with that, I'm going to move to a quick overview of our TX360 product. As a solution, I want to make it clear there are a ton of solutions out there that you can use. Internal solutions like SharePoint, Slack, other ones like that. External solutions, or Reddit, other solutions out there that'll actually drive information sharing. So this is a way, not the way. Although we'd be happy to talk to you about our solution. So we have two major services. One is TX360, which is a cloud-based threat monitoring and intelligence solution that gives you an entire set of tools that your corporate nerve center can actually use to drive the kind of information ingestion and sharing that we've been talking about. And then we have an alerting and intelligence service where you don't have to gather the information. You can go in and select information from our hundreds and thousands of different feeds that we organize into a new service that can be delivered to both your screen in the sense of a dashboard, or to your email and text as an alert. And I'll touch on each one of those for a second. We also offer professional services to help you drive information sharing and intelligence capabilities. So for the recovery, what we allow is a solution that'll help be a tool inside your corporate nerve center, allow you to do metered communications to your company partners and customers. And what that means is the ability to send different people different information. So things you want to share with your customers may be different than what you want to share with your supply chain or some of your other industry partners. And so important to figure out how to meter that information in a good way We also allow color coding by taking all your resources, putting them on a map, and being able to color them by, red, yellow, green, and monitor all the different changing information that that I've mentioned throughout this presentation. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. So if you want to visualize that, if you want to think about, our platform inside your corporate nerve center, being able to, bring information both from inside the corporation, from outside the corporation, assimilate all that together, and be able to share that bi-directionally, both with your organization and bi-directionally with your customers, your supply chain, and other folks out there in your ecosystem. That'll give you an idea as I go through our different slides about what our capability looks like. So this is a recovery information sharing exchange that we're building currently, that takes a look at all the different aspects we think of the of different areas of the recovery. So regulation, supply chain, virus recurrence, local government issues, all those types of things, where each will have a a very user-friendly dashboard that'll and I'll give you some examples of those. The way our product is structured is we have intelligence channels that gather information from all those different sources that I talked about. We have the ability to take your corporate assets or organizational assets and drive those to a geospatial map, and then combine those two to give you both smart alerts to your cell phone, and also visual dashboards to your PC, Mac, and tablets. So our intelligence channels, we actually have about 5,000 channels. Our product comes with 2,000 plus channels from around the world, multiple continents. We've put up to 13,000 asset locations into our mapping system for a particular customer, be able to monitor places around the world. So you can imagine, with 13,000 locations, there's a fair amount of things that could happen with those different assets on a day in and day out basis. And as I mentioned, we do smart alerts, which are real-time delivery of rich alerts, both with mapping, with proximity alerting, which means it'll tell you how far from the particular asset you have did that alert happen, so you can judge how important is it for me to respond to that as we speak. And then we have dashboards, and a dashboard, especially for a nerve center, you can have a dashboard called a common operating picture, which is a blend of information, both external and internal, visual from a geospatial standpoint, and also information for social media news, all blended together into a unique picture for your organization, and with your organization's assets actually on the map. So that's what you're seeing here is the downtown London common operating picture built for one of our customers. And similarly, these are one of the COVID-19 dashboards. So these dashboards are updated on a continuous basis. You can see the different status gadgets on the right actually reflect the number of cases in a real dashboard. This is obviously a picture. These would be updated on multiple times a day, along with news about from different sources coming in, and being able to leverage some of the fantastic map and tracking capabilities out there around the virus. And so from a product standpoint, the way we explain our product or differentiate our product from other products out there in the market is, we're actually very quick to deploy. We're a software as a service product, which avoids a major, OpEx or a CapEx expense, a capital expense that you have to budget, 12 to 18 months ahead of time. We're actually software as a service, so an OpEx expense, and then we're fast to learn how to use, and we integrate and interoperate. Julie mentioned a book I wrote called Silver Bullets, which is about interoperable data. So if you look at things like Common Alerting Protocol and GeoRSS and KML, these are data standards that the web has been built on that allow a very rapid assimilation of information into other applications. And we also have a full API capability, and that allows us to automate your workflows to give you exactly the right information that you need in order to drive that information throughout your organization, and then also to share with partners. So with that, I'd like to wrap up, and we'll certainly move to Q&A if you have some questions. I just want to summarize that information sharing is really important. It's going to leverage everybody's knowledge. Having multiple, smart people working together in both virtual and local relationships is a great thing. You see this every day when you talk to people about, oh, you ought to watch this movie or you ought to watch this, listen to this particular piece of music, and those recommendations are fantastic. And you build a radar of, who do you trust, who do you like, whose information should you absorb? Well, the same thing can hold true as you start doing information sharing at the organizational level. Who has the best knowledge? Who do I share with? How do I build a trust-based relationship with those people over a long period of time and continue to help gain better situational awareness? So the ability to look out in front of my organization and see the threats that are going to happen to me and be able to respond as quickly as possible, which tends to help you prevent things completely or at least mitigate the impact for you. And we've looked at our tools. So with that, I'd encourage you to help stem the pandemic by doing all the things we've all been doing for the last 6 or 8 weeks. Try to accelerate the recovery through both planning and moving forward with a great sense of urgency, and especially to remember all these lessons that we're learning about how to handle contentious times. We've got other threats out there, and we're probably going to need all those lessons and all those capabilities as we move forward. So thank you for attending, and I'll be happy to take some questions, Julie.
Sure. So as we discuss some of these questions, please feel free to enter any comments or questions in the chat window. First question is, Pete, are there and what are the risks of information sharing?
So information sharing is, there are always risks, and the biggest risk is saying something that you shouldn't have said to somebody you shouldn't have said it to, and it being repeated, through the social media megaphone that we have today. So, and the way I would mitigate that risk is to make sure you're sharing inside of trusted groups, and there are several information sharing networks like InfraGard that I mentioned that have good rule sets for governing how the information is shared, how it's used. Is there a non-attribution rule, and are the people vetted for being in that community? And then making sure you're sharing things clearly. For the recovery, there's a tremendous amount of information you can share which isn't internally focused. It's about, oh, my county just did this regulation. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Oh, this other county just published a best practice. Let's pick that up, and God, you should look at this too because it's going to affect you. So many different ways to use information sharing without encountering any kind of tough risks.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the InfraGard organization. Are there professional associations considered a good place to share?
Yes, I would bet everybody on the phone belongs to one or two professional organizations. Many of them have a inter-association sharing capability. ASIS, which is the security industry's major trade organization, just launched a series of chat rooms so that they're capable of sharing information at a loose level inside that trade association.
Mm-hmm. So here's another one about information overload. There's so much information out there. How do you handle that?
This is a big problem for everybody. If you go back and if you look at that accelerate the curve or accelerate the recovery diagram that's up on the screen, that's over the last 25 years. That's how information has been accumulating as well at an exponential rate. So every day there's more and more to go to and look at, but that's actually an argument for tools and sharing relationships that help you, find the right information out of that sea of stuff that's emerging every day. Literally the amount is just a huge torrent of things coming at you. So picking out those right needles of things that are actionable for your organization is really key, and information sharing can help you with that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Pete, with your crystal ball, when do you think the economy will return to normal?
I honestly don't think it'll ever return to the normal that was normal 3 or 4 months ago. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to see things as small as not handshaking, for a long time, and which is in some ways sad, but it's also a a change, all the way to travel, virtual trade shows, and a whole series of ways of accomplishing the work of the world without some of the ways that we used to do it. So I think this will be a catalyst for change, that we'll see a lot of things changing from an economic standpoint. Without being an economist, I would guess it's going to take at least 12 to 18 months to get back to the level of economic activity that we're at 3 or 4 months ago, and I've heard some forecasts as long as 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. So on the topic of interoperable data, could you maybe describe an example of that and how it helps with information sharing?
Sure. So one of the if you've ever read through 25 unstructured documents, you know how hard and difficult that can be to extract meaningful information. We've done a lot of work since the beginning of Swan Island Networks with a standard, an information standard called Common Alerting Protocol, which allows for very rapid creation and distribution of real-time alert information. And this standard, which has grown up over the last 15 years, is used worldwide by the Weather Service, by USGS, the World Meteorological Organization, and a number of FEMA and a number of other organizations, in order to exchange real-time information about alerts. And similarly, Google, as a good corporate citizen, turned over KML as a standard to the world, which allows different geographic systems to be able to interoperate through a standard called Keystone Markup Language.
Mm-hmm. Great. So finally, last question regarding TX360. If there are people on the call that would like more information or a demo of that, what's the best way to do that?
Our website is actually on the screen in front of you as we speak. You're welcome to go to that website. You're also perfectly willing or be happy to chat with you directly over email if you have any follow-up information, or if you have any other just questions about information sharing that we can help you with. We're all in this economic recovery together, and so we want to do as much as we can to help everybody that we come into contact with to try to get back to what our new normal is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thanks, Pete, and thank you everybody who attended. Wish you well, and hope to hear from you soon. All right, thanks.
Great. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.